This week, a VA Secretary confirmation hearing, the defense appropriation bills move ahead, and we discuss our fears of a looming attack from Skynet or aliens or all sorts of other stuff on Political Fallout Shelter. Welcome to the Political Fallout Shelter, where we come to you each week from our safe, secure, getting less and safe, secure each week, basement underneath the Capitol. I'm Leo Shane, Deputy Editor at Military Times. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I encourage you to keep subscribing. Tell your friends, tell your family. We're on Google Play. We're on iTunes. If we don't get a few more subscribers soon, Joe's going to have to venture back into the world, and it's getting really nasty out there. So, speaking of Joe, with me, as always, my co-host who owns 16 different pairs of camouflage pajamas, Joe Gould, Capitol Hill Bureau Chief for Defense News. Joe,
how's it going, Leo?
It's been a week. It's been, look, a lot of big news that doesn't have to do with the military, but overshadowed some big military news too. We had a Supreme Court justice retire this week, which sent most of the city into a tizzy. We had a member of the House Democratic leadership losing a primary to a virtual unknown. We have the ongoing immigration problems and family reunifications and all that. And we had the tragedy out in Annapolis, Maryland, at the Annapolis Capitol, which I know is something that's hit both of us pretty hard.
Yeah, totally. I spent the early part of my career working in, like community journalism, small newsrooms, and my heart really aches for that newsroom. I don't know what it must be like there today, and I just, I think we as journalists are all thinking about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was some news here on Capitol Hill. Defense appropriations bills moved in the House and Senate, and also the VA Secretary was up here. Tell us about the confirmation hearing.
Yeah, I mean, we finally had the VA Secretary come up here and finally had a confirmation hearing. We thought this was going to happen 2 months ago when the White House physician Rodney Jackson was nominated to take over as the next VA Secretary. Obviously, his nomination imploded. Allegations of drinking on the job, unprofessional behavior, all sorts of problems. So now we're at Robert Wilkie, who's the current Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness at the Pentagon, somebody who's a longtime bureaucrat, seen as a much more stable pick, and someone who was working as acting secretary for a couple months there through all of this turmoil. So he's already gotten a lot of good reviews from veterans groups and finally made it up to Capitol Hill for a hearing.
Yeah, and there was a kind of an airing of some of his past in the press. The connection to Jesse Helms, who was sort of, has a connection with sort of racial politics, and sort of his connection to kind of Confederate groups, and so. How did that play out in his confirmation hearings? Did it play out?
Yeah, so the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal had pretty extensive articles in advance of the hearing talking about, as you said, his past work. He was an aide for Jesse Helms, aide for Trent Lott, worked closely with Donald Rumsfeld, three pretty controversial figures in the D.C. area, and they brought up his advocacy on behalf of some policies that were seen as racially insensitive, sexist. He attended a number of events that were related to a group with the sons of Confederate veterans. So what seemed like could be a pretty contentious confirmation hearing, and then it didn't really come up. I talked to some senators beforehand who said they didn't see it as a major issue. These are things pretty far in the past. They felt his explanations were pretty good. But I expected us to get his explanations, and we were almost an hour and a half into the confirmation hearing before anyone really engaged on the issue. We had a couple of people dancing around it, a couple of promises from him that he'll represent all veterans. But it wasn't until Tom Tillis, a Republican from North Carolina, and Wilkie's, a former boss of Wilkie, his biggest advocate on the committee, basically was setting him up to knock down all of these allegations. But
inoculate him.
Yeah, but by the same token, it was the only real engagement he got on this. So, Wilkie said, some of these positions in the past he would reevaluate with today's political environment and with what he knows today. Some of these were, especially the Confederate events, were officially sanctioned military events and congressional events, and he would not have attended them if there wasn't that kind of backing at the time. So I felt like his explanations were pretty straightforward and reasonable. But the fact that it took the committee that long to get to them was a bit baffling.
Well, maybe they didn't want it to be a distraction because some of the issues that did come up had to do with the state of the agency.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that Senator Tester and Senator Isaacson were kind of asking about morale at the VA. And really, I got the sense that maybe the agency is in free fall, whereas like 4 months ago when we were talking about it, it was rock solid. What happened? Is it really gone so far downhill?
You and the rest of the veterans community is asking this. I mean, look, all last year, VA was like the easy win for Trump. There was tons of legislation getting passed. He was getting a bunch of policy things advanced. It was the good news story of an administration that was pretty turbulent. And that all turned on a dime at the start of this year with the controversy surrounding Secretary Shulkin, his travels, his handling internally, some of these fights with political operatives in the White House. And as you said, that all came up in the hearing. Senator Tester said, look, Shulkin's the only one who's gone. All these people he was fighting with are still there. You, Secretary Wilkie, are you going to feel confident that you can step in and clean up the department? Do you think you can deal with this turmoil and raise morale and deal with these issues?
I mean, is the drama at the top of the agency super important, or does it roll downhill and affect veterans in any way, or is it like an issue if you're really looking at sort of the morale of the workforce?
Yeah. It's worth noting over the last few months that as all of this uncertainty has happened and all this leadership fight has been going on, benefits checks are still going out. The hospitals are still open. They're looking at wait times. They've passed massive legislation to improve outside care. So it's not like operations have stopped, but the VA has had a public affairs problem for, 4.5, 5 years now. And this does not help. It doesn't help when you don't have a leader who's out there being a cheerleader, being a stabilizing force, being someone who's explaining what's happening internally. And even when Secretary Wilkie gets confirmed, because he will get confirmed, it seemed pretty clear from the hearing this week that, barring a meteor strike in the next couple of days, they'll come back and they'll confirm him. He still has a bunch of other high-level positions that have to be filled over there, and he's got a lot of mid-level folks who have left. And without that kind of bench to rely on, it's going to be tough to keep things rolling and to get people confident in the department.
You imagine that an organization can only run so long as sort of like a zombie without a head before you have to replace that person.
No, absolutely. So, look, we'll be following that for a little bit more, especially next month as it comes up. I wanted to shift to defense appropriations because that was on the House floor this week, and there were some interesting fights over there. This is a bill that's pretty close to what the White House has asked for, but still some good wrinkles in there for lawmakers to bicker over.
Well, so the Senate Appropriations Committee advanced its bill. And they're going to send it to the Senate floor at some point. And the real drama was in the House, where where appropriators brought their bill to the floor, and part of that process is bringing up of amendments. And so authorizers, that's the Armed Services Committee, a couple of key authorizers had some amendments related to naval procurement. One of them was meant to increase the quantity of submarines. Rob Whitman, who's the chairman of the Sea Power Subcommittee, the ranking Democrat on that committee, Joe Courtney, were both behind this amendment to increase the submarine buy. Well, in order to do that, they had to rearrange funding and take it out of programs. So they're basically like, pulling the threads out of the sweater that
Right.
that appropriators had knitted, and they did not like that. And the Pentagon weighed in. There was a letter from Pat Shanahan, who serves under Defense Secretary Jim Mattis. So there was this interesting kind of evening drama debate on the floor where appropriators stepped in and pushed back against authorizers to say, Kay Granger, who's the chairwoman of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, pushed back to say, just because you want to give the Navy flexibility doesn't mean that it's a good idea. There was some question about whether this there would be costs in the out years. Basically, it would blow a hole in Navy procurement. So And so
And this was not a partisan fight either.
No.
This is Republicans on Republicans fighting.
Yeah.
And, for a change, we've got philosophical fights instead of just the R versus D fights on the floor.
Right.
There.
And when it came time to vote the following day, it got the proposed amendment got crushed. It was I think if you probably you have appropriators, you want to, maybe lawmakers want to let them do their job. The Pentagon weighed in and said they don't want it. Why not listen to the Pentagon and appropriators?
So if that, and that was a really interesting subplot to all this, but if that's the best subplot, then things must be going pretty well. There's not these immigration fights we heard. There's not these other larger things. So, we're set up to get appropriations done really early.
We'll see. And I should note that there were...
No, we're set up. It's all good. This is going to be the year that everything comes in.
Let's see. I just want to say, since you mentioned immigration, I'll just say as a side note that the Democrats had a number of proposed amendments that were aimed at, aimed at the Department of Homeland Security potentially leaning on the Department of Defense to supply facilities, to supply attorneys, to get these cases expedited. Mm-hmm. I think we all know the drama that's happening on the border, and Democrats wanted to wall off the Department of Defense.
I see what you did there.
Thank you. And the Rules Committee, which is Republican controlled, screened those amendments out. They never came to the floor. But it does give you a little bit of a preview of what might happen if you saw Democrats take back the House in the fall. We'll see. Okay. Anyway,
all right, no.
But
all
yeah,
right, so Senator,
sorry.
You're avoiding the question here, though.
Yes.
Why am I not going to have my appropriations bills done?
So there. So the president has said that he doesn't want to vote for another omnibus spending bill. And Democrats have favored these sorts of bills because they feel like by cutting a larger deal, they are able to get non-defense priorities taken care of at the same time as defense priorities.
Well, and there's also this fear that if they were to pass the defense appropriations bill, that Republicans could come back and say, oh, well, now that we've got the military side taken care of, we can totally cut over here. We can force you to do something else. So if they don't pass at the same time, there's this good, is there any good faith that if we give you what we agreed on in the military, are you actually going to agree on, are you going to go ahead with what we agreed on in non-defense spending?
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to be an issue. That would still be an issue. So they seem to be taking a middle path, which is to take defense and non-defense, or take kind of security and non-security appropriations bills and package them as minibuses. Mm-hmm. So there is this conversation going on about the what they call the Labor H bill, the Health Human Services, a real priority bill for Democrats, having that merged with the defense bill. But
and we did already see this with the Veterans Affairs budget. Veterans Affairs and military construction was merged with the legislative and energy bill. Again, a handful of different things that maybe together is non-controversial than passing one of them separately.
Right, and if you need, conservatives may object. House conservatives may object to this approach. Let's see what happens there. At the same time, the president has been signaling that he's interested in border wall funding. Well, that's likely a no-go with Democrats, especially looking into, it's a real divisive issue heading into midterm elections. Democrats, I would feel, would be unlikely to cave on that, but what do they do there? I think that's a big question mark. But it hangs over the process, and I have already started to see some lawmakers associated with defense, Rob Whitman, who we mentioned earlier, Kay Granger, who we mentioned earlier, both sounding the alarm about the dangers of a CR. And here we are again.
So here we are again. We could get to the end of September. There's no appropriations deal, and we've got a temporary budget deal yet again, pushing us to somewhere into fiscal 2019.
Yeah, that would not be good.
So, look, one other piece of news up here this week that I think is worth us noting. The Senate, in wrap-up work late on Thursday, approved a new commander for the mission in Afghanistan, Army General Austin Miller. He's going to be the 17th commander up here. You and I have both listened to a lot of this. There's certainly quite a bit of war fatigue, especially when it comes to Afghanistan, and uncertainty about where this is going, what the strategy is.
Didn't Elizabeth Warren kind of make the joke that we've turned the corner so many times in Afghanistan, we've made a complete circle?
Yeah, she did. And we heard, General Miller was up here just about a month ago testifying on this, saying, look, he sees real progress. He thinks there's real, real achievement and, a path ahead here. But he also said, I can't give you any timelines. I can't give you any hard deadlines to hook onto. And, we're seeing more and more skepticism as this goes on. What does winning look like? How does this ever end? By the same token, quite a few Republican senators, including Senator Tom Cotton, said the enemy's still there. We still have a mission there. Mm-hmm. We can't afford to let up now. So I don't know where to leave that other than to say there's a new commander. This mission goes on, and the Senate's going to keep watching it, and the House is going to keep watching to see.
Yeah, I mean, there was a new authorization of the use of military force that was floated, but it basically codifies the existing status quo. So it's let's see what happens.
We may be talking about the next Afghanistan commander in 2 more years, and doing this again. All right, look, one other less significant issue, but one that certainly got a lot of conversation in defense circles up here. This week, Air Force General Mike Helms, who's the head of Air Combat Command, had a briefing with a whole bunch of reporters and was talking about something called Project Maven, which is using artificial intelligence to sift through some drone footage, provide better intelligence, sort of smart learning, figuring all this out. And that prompted one of our dear colleagues over at Task and Purpose, Jeff Schogel, to ask the Pentagon if they are now building Skynet, and if we are all headed for a certain disaster here. So inspired by Jeff, what's the pop culture scenario that most apocalyptic scenario here that most terrifies you? Because I feel like we're a minute away from Dr. Strangelove at all times, anyways. So
I think we're already kind of living it. Like Dr. Strangelove crossed with Back to the Future 2.
Back to the Future. I don't even remember Back to the Future. It's the one with sports gambling. Which but I guess we have sports gambling.
When Biff takes over the town.
Right.
That's sort of kind of where we're at now.
But that has a happy ending though. That's not the same as Strangelove.
Yeah, but you need a time machine. You need a time machine to get the happy ending.
DARPA's probably working on something like that. Look,
welcome our new robot overlords.
Here's my thing. It's July 4th, a couple days here. I think we're probably overdue for an alien invasion at this point. I see an Independence Day scenario where we're the military is fending. I don't know if F-35 can engage with alien spacecraft. I think it's a legitimate question the Armed Services Committee should be looking into.
I think that's kind of a subtly political statement that you're making there. Doesn't the White House get blown up in Independence Day?
There's a lot of things that get blown up there. There's already enough political uncertainty and frayed feelings here. Let's not go there. All right. Look, we'll keep trying. We'll stay away from that. We'll keep tracking all the other stuff. You can follow our stuff all week long at militarytimes.com or at defensenews.com. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Leo Shane.
And I'm at Reporter Joe.
Thanks for tuning in.